I still hear the ring before I see it. Not our wedding vows, not the clink of wine glasses, not even my wife's voice when she told me she was leaving me. What I hear, what I will probably hear until the day I die, is the hard, metallic crack of a wedding ring slamming into the wall beside my head. One sharp sound, one flash of gold. 1 second long enough to split my life clean in half. If you want to know how a man's world ends, it doesn't always happen with sirens or smashed windows or a screaming match in the front yard. Sometimes it happens in a bright kitchen with candles on the table, a cake waiting to be cut, and 2 children upstairs who still think their parents are the safest thing in their lives. My name is Daniel Mercer. I was 52 years old on the night my marriage died. My wife, Lauren, and I had been married for 25 years. We had 2 kids, a house just outside Columbus, and the kind of life people call solid because it looks too ordinary to ever break. We weren't flashy. We weren't dramatic. We were the couple other people pointed at when they wanted to believe that loyalty still existed. That night was our 25th anniversary. I left work early. I bought flowers too expensive for a man like me, because 25 years deserved something bigger than grocery store roses. I picked up a lemon cake from the bakery she loved. I took the good bottle of wine out of the cabinet, the one we kept saving for some special night that never seemed special enough. I ironed a shirt. I lit candles. I seasoned the roast exactly the way she liked it. I even stood in the kitchen rehearsing what I wanted to say, because men like me are not always great at saying the soft things out loud. I was going to thank her for staying through the lean years, thank her for our daughter Emma and our son Noah. Thank her for the nights we survived when money was tight and tempers were short and life felt heavier than love. Thank her for still being there. I wanted to tell her that if I had to do this life all over again, I would still choose her. At 6:42, I checked the clock and smiled because she was late in the exact way she had always been late, by just enough to make me pretend I was annoyed while secretly feeling relieved that some things never changed. I sent her a text. "Dinner's ready when you get here." No answer. At 6:58, I checked my phone again. At 7:03, headlights swept across the front window. I remember the relief. That is the part that still shames me. I remember straightening my shirt, grabbing the flowers, and thinking, there she is. Then the front door opened. Lauren stepped inside first, and behind her came a man I had never met, but I recognized him immediately from the old stories she had told me back when we were young, and everything sounded harmless because it belonged to the past. Ryan Calloway. Her ex-boyfriend. The reckless one. The mistake. The closed chapter. The man whose name had lived in old sentences and faded memories, never in my house. Until that night. I didn't say anything at first. I just stood there holding flowers like an idiot, staring at my wife and the ghost she had dragged into my living room. "Daniel," she said. That was it. Just my name. But there are ways a person can say your name that warn you a blade is coming, and I heard it before she said another word. I looked at him, then at her, then back at him. Why is he here? Ryan didn't answer. Lauren didn't move. The candles behind me flickered. Somewhere upstairs, I heard a floorboard creak, one of the kids moving around in their room. The roast was still in the oven, keeping warm. The entire house looked like it was waiting for a celebration, and right in the middle of it stood my wife with another man, carrying an ending she had clearly practiced on the drive home. "We need to talk," she said. I have never liked that sentence, not because it is loud, because it is calm, because it arrives dressed like conversation when it is really carrying a funeral. I set the flowers down on the table. My hand was already trembling, and I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of watching me shake. Then talk. She looked at the candles. The cake. The wine. Her eyes rested on the anniversary card I had left beside her plate. For 1 second, one tiny, brutal second, I thought I saw guilt move across her face. Then, she looked back at me and said, "I'm leaving." The room didn't spin. My heart didn't explode. Nothing dramatic happened. That's what made it worse. The world stayed horribly normal. The refrigerator hummed. A spoon settled in the sink. A car passed outside. Life kept moving even as mine stopped. "What?" "I'm leaving, Daniel," she said again, and this time her voice broke just enough to sound human. "I can't do this anymore. I haven't been happy for a long time. I tried. I really did. But I can't keep pretending. I want a divorce. Pretending. That was the word that hit hardest. Not leaving, not divorce. Pretending. As if our whole marriage had been a costume she was finally too tired to wear. As if the years, the children, the grief we survived, the hospital visits, the bills, the birthdays, the funerals, the late-night talks, the way she used to fall asleep with her hand on my chest, none of it had been real enough to deserve a better word than pretending. I stared at her so long my eyes started to burn. "You brought him here," I said slowly, "to tell me that?" Ryan shifted beside her and finally spoke. "I'm not here to cause trouble." I turned to him so fast even he took half a step back. "You're standing in my house on my wedding anniversary," I said. "Trouble is already here." Lauren stepped slightly toward me, but not to comfort me, to contain me, to manage me, to keep the scene under control, as if this were a difficult conversation she needed to moderate. "Please don't make this worse," she whispered. The audacity of that nearly knocked the breath out of me. "Worse?" I said. "Lauren, it's our 25th anniversary. I cooked dinner. I bought flowers. Our kids are upstairs. And you walk into this house with your ex-boyfriend and ask me not to make it worse?" Tears sprang into her eyes then, but they landed too late to matter. There are tears that come from pain, and tears that come from consequences. I no longer trusted myself to tell the difference. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," she said. That sentence told me more than she realized. It meant this had a plan. It meant this had a timeline. It meant there had been other conversations, other rehearsals, other moments where she and this man decided how my life would be dismantled. "How long?" I asked. She looked away. I felt something cold open inside my chest. "How long, Lauren?" Ryan looked at the floor. She pressed her lips together, and when she finally answered, her voice came out flat and stripped of excuses. 8 months. It is amazing what the body does when a truth is too big to survive all at once. Mine went strangely numb. 8 months. 8 months of good morning kisses. 8 months of asking me to pass the salt at dinner. 8 months of folding laundry beside me on the couch. 8 months of living in the same bed while carrying another man around in her heart, like a secret room I had no key to. I reached for the back of a chair because my knees had gone weak. 8 months, I repeated, because sometimes the only way to believe a sentence is to hear yourself say it. She nodded. I laughed then, but it came out wrong, small, hollow, the sound a man makes when his humiliation has outrun his anger. "How many people knew?" Her face changed. That was all the answer I needed. "Your sister?" I asked. "Your friends? Did people know? Did they know while they sat in my house? Did they smile in my face while I played husband and father and anniversary dinner host?" "No one knew everything," she said quickly. Everything. That word landed too, meaning enough people knew something, meaning I had been walking through my own life under fluorescent shame, and I was the last one to see it. Before I could say another word, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Noah appeared first, 17, half a man and half the little boy who still left cereal bowls in the sink. He looked from me to Lauren to Ryan, and I watched the exact moment his expression changed. Kids know. They always know before you explain. They read the temperature of a room faster than adults do. "What's going on?" he asked. Lauren turned toward him, panic flashing across her face. "Go upstairs." But he didn't move. Emma came down behind him, home from college for the weekend, and when she saw Lauren standing there with another man, the color drained from her face so fast, it scared me. "Mom?" she said. Nobody answered. The silence got ugly. Ryan shifted again. Just a small movement, but it was enough. Enough for Noah to square his shoulders. Enough for Emma to grab the railing. Enough for the whole truth to start taking shape in the room, without anyone daring to speak it aloud. "Who is that?" Noah asked, and his voice had changed now. It had dropped into something harder. Something already hurt. Lauren opened her mouth, but Ryan reached into his jacket pocket before she could answer. To this day, I do not know if he meant to humiliate me, provoke me, or simply prove some point to himself. Maybe he wanted to mark territory. Maybe he wanted to show the kids that their mother belonged to him now. Maybe he was just the kind of man who mistook cruelty for power. But he pulled out a gold ring, my wedding ring. And with a look I will never forget, he hurled it at my face. It came fast, a flash of gold, a blur, a cruel little arc through candlelight. It missed my cheek by inches and slammed into the wall behind me with a hard metallic crack that sliced straight through Emma's scream. The ring dropped, spun once across the hardwood, and rolled under the dining table, the same table I had set for our anniversary dinner less than an hour earlier. For 1 second, nobody moved. Then, Noah exploded. He lunged. I caught him around the chest before he got to Ryan, and I still don't know how I had the strength. My son was shaking with rage, Emma was crying, Lauren was yelling, and Ryan had the nerve to lift his hands like he was the one in danger. That's when something in me changed. Not loudly, not dramatically, just completely. I grabbed Noah tighter and looked straight at Lauren. Not her tears, not her guilt, not her excuses, just her. "Get out," I said. She stared at me. "Daniel, get out." The words came colder this time. Cleaner. Final. Ryan muttered something under his breath, but he started backing toward the door. Lauren stayed where she was for another heartbeat, frozen between the family she had detonated and the man she had chosen to follow. And for the smallest moment I think she expected me to stop her, to beg, to break, to ask her to stay. I didn't. I stood there with one arm around my son, my daughter sobbing on the stairs, and my wedding ring still spinning in my memory. Then she turned, walked out the front door, and left with him. The door shut, and the silence that came after was the loudest thing I had ever heard. Noah tore free from me and ran upstairs. Emma sank onto the bottom step and folded in on herself like someone had cut the strings holding her upright. I stood in the middle of the kitchen and stared at the empty doorway so long my eyes went blurry. Then I bent down, reached under the table, and picked up the ring. It was warm. That detail still haunts me, not because metal matters, because someone else had been holding it, because my marriage, the one I had spent 25 years protecting, had just been tossed at my face by another man and landed warm in my palm like a final insult. Nobody slept that night. Emma cried until her voice gave out. Noah punched a hole in his bedroom wall and bled through his knuckles before I could get to him. I sat at the kitchen table in the dark while the candles burned themselves into little pools of wax. The roast stayed untouched. The cake stayed in its box. The wine sat unopened between two empty plates, like the evening itself had died sitting up. At 3:11 in the morning, My phone lit up. Lauren. I stared at her name until it stopped looking familiar. Her message was short. I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt the kids. I read it once. Then, twice. Then, I put the phone face down. Because that was the sentence that finally made me understand the size of what she had done. She wasn't sorry when she started. She wasn't sorry when she hid it. She wasn't sorry through 8 months of lies and weekends and secret messages and whatever else she had built behind my back. She was sorry now that the children had seen her walk out, now that the betrayal had faces and tears and broken drywall. Morning came anyway. That's the disrespectful thing about disaster. The sun still rises, the coffee still brews, the dog still needs to be fed, your phone still buzzes. The world keeps asking ordinary things from you while your chest feels caved in. Within hours, people knew. Emma told her aunt. Noah told a friend. My sister called twice. Lauren's brother left me a voicemail so full of fake sympathy, I deleted it halfway through. Every message felt like sandpaper. Some people sounded shocked. Some sounded too careful. Some sounded like they had suspected more than they were willing to admit. That was another wound I didn't expect, the feeling that my humiliation had witnesses. 2 days later, Lauren came back for clothes. She walked into our bedroom with 2 empty suitcases and the careful body language of someone trying to act respectful inside the ruins she created. She opened drawers, folded sweaters, took shoes from the closet, lifted framed photos from the nightstand. I stood in the doorway and watched my wife pack herself out of our life like she was checking out of a hotel. Ryan has a place downtown, she said quietly. I almost laughed at the word place. Such a small, harmless word for the hole she had blown through 4 lives. She reached for a navy sweater I had bought her 3 Christmases ago and finally said, I know you hate me. I looked at her for a long time. This was the woman who had held my hand when my father died. The woman who had laughed in the passenger seat until she cried because I sang the wrong lyrics on a road trip. The woman who knew how I liked my coffee and how I went silent when I was scared. The woman who had once sworn before God and family that home was wherever we were together, and somehow she had become a stranger with my wife's face. I don't even know what to call what I feel, I said. I just know the life I thought I had was not the life I was living. That was the first thing I said that made her cry for real. Not because it accused her, because it named her. The divorce was a slow, ugly humiliation dressed up as paperwork. Lawyers, accounts, furniture, schedules, signatures. The death of a marriage translated into documents and deadlines. I learned that grief can sit under fluorescent lights in a conference room while 2 attorneys discuss equity in the house where your daughter learned to walk. Lauren kept saying she wanted this to stay civil. Civil. I hated that word. There was nothing civil about being lied to in your own bed. Nothing civil about my son refusing to answer his mother's calls. Nothing civil about Emma deleting family photos off her phone because she couldn't bear to look at them. Nothing civil about explaining to people at church why you were suddenly attending alone. But for the kids, I stayed calm. Or at least I performed calm. Which I guess is its own kind of survival. Noah stopped speaking to Lauren altogether. Emma tried at first, then stopped after a phone call that ended with both of them crying and neither of them feeling less broken. Holidays became negotiations. Birthdays became landmines. Every family tradition we had ever built suddenly needed rules, calendars, and emotional armor. About 3 months after she left, I found our anniversary album in the hall closet while looking for old tax records. I sat on the floor and opened it. There we were, 25 years smiling back at me in glossy pages. Our wedding day, our first apartment with the ugly carpet, Lauren holding Emma in a rocking chair, Noah asleep on my shoulder in a hospital waiting room, beach trips, Christmas mornings, backyard barbecues, school plays, funerals, real life. Messy, beautiful, ordinary life. And that was the moment I broke. Not in front of the lawyer, not in front of Lauren, not when the ring hit the wall. On the floor of a hallway, holding a photo album. Because betrayal is not just losing the person, it is losing the meaning of every memory and being forced to ask which parts were real and which parts were already dying while you still called them love. Emma found me there. She knelt beside me without saying anything and wrapped her arms around my shoulders while I cried harder than I had cried when my father died. That's the part nobody tells you. One day, if your children see enough of your pain, they stop being sheltered by you and start carrying pieces of you themselves. "It's okay, Dad," she whispered. It wasn't okay. But her hand on my back kept me from drowning in it. The months that followed were not dramatic. They were worse. They were ordinary. I went to work. I paid bills. I learned how quiet a house can get when trust has left it. I started taking walks at night because the walls felt too full of old voices. I saw a therapist for the first time in my life and learned that humiliation sits deeper than anger. I learned that being abandoned does not mean being unlovable. I learned that some people do not leave because you failed them. They leave because loyalty feels too heavy once desire starts dressing itself up as destiny. Almost a year later, Lauren called. Her voice sounded smaller than I remembered. Not softer. Smaller. Like life had reduced her. "Can we talk?" she asked. I almost said no. Instead, I met her at a coffee shop across town. She looked tired, not cinematic, not wrecked in some satisfying dramatic way, just worn down. Human consequences had finally reached her, and like most consequences, they were less glamorous than the fantasy that created them. She didn't drag it out. "Ryan's gone," she said. I felt nothing at first, and that startled me. I had imagined that moment in my darker hours. I thought I would feel triumph, vindication, some hard, righteous satisfaction, but pain had matured into something quieter by then. Her suffering didn't heal mine. It didn't restore the missing years. It didn't give my children their innocence back. "I made a terrible mistake," she said. "The biggest mistake of my life." I let the words sit there. Then she said, "I know I don't deserve it, but is there any chance you could ever forgive me?" I looked at her for a long time. There was a season of my life when that question would have shattered me. But by then, I had buried too much of myself to confuse pity with love. "Maybe one day," I said. But forgiveness is not the same thing as trust. And trust is not the same thing as home. She cried quietly into a napkin while people around us ordered coffee and checked their phones and lived their unbroken little afternoons. When I got home, I thought the worst was behind me. It wasn't. A week later, my attorney called and said he needed clarification on several old financial statements because some charges didn't line up with the timeline Lauren had provided during the divorce. I almost told him I didn't care, but something in his tone made me open the folder he sent over. I sat at my kitchen table that night with bank records, credit card statements, and hotel receipts spread out under the same light where I had once signed birthday cards and helped my kids with homework. And then I saw it. A charge from a hotel in Cincinnati. Then another. Then another. Different dates. Different months. Same pattern. Not 8 months. Longer. I kept flipping pages. My stomach started turning. There was one charge dated the week my father died. Another dated the weekend Lauren told me she was staying with a friend whose mother was sick. Another during the 3 days I was out of town helping Noah at a baseball camp. By the time I reached the bottom of the stack, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the paper. It hadn't been 8 months. It had been almost 3 years. 3 years. 3 years of lies laid quietly inside my life. 3 years of watching me grieve my father while she met another man in hotel rooms. 3 years of kissing me goodbye, and then driving somewhere else. 3 years of coming home making dinner, asking about the kids, folding laundry, sitting beside me in church, laughing in family photos. 3 years of betrayal, wearing the face of normal life. I didn't cry that time. I just sat there in total silence, staring at the dates like they were bullet holes. And suddenly the night of our anniversary looked different. She hadn't come home to end a marriage. She had come home to finally confess one she had already buried. That night, I went into the attic, opened the box where I had thrown the ring, and held it in my hand again. For months, I thought the most violent thing that had happened was Ryan throwing that ring at my face. I was wrong. The most violent thing was learning she had held me while I buried my father, and then gone to him. That was the moment something final happened in me. Not rage, not revenge, just a door closing forever. Lauren called again after the divorce was final. I let it ring. Then she texted, "Please, just tell me if there is any hope for us." I looked at the message for a long time. Then I wrote back one sentence. "The shocking part isn't that you left on our anniversary. It's that I finally know you were gone long before that night." She never replied. And that was the last honest thing our marriage ever gave me. Not closure. Not justice. Truth. Cold, late, and unforgivable truth. So if you ask me what I remember most, it's not her apology. It's not the candles. It's not even the moment she walked out the door. It's opening those bank statements and realizing the real ending didn't happen on our 25th anniversary. It happened 3 years earlier. I just wasn't invited to the funeral.